In this vast universe, every sentient being experiences a common thread: suffering. It's a profound word, isn't it? Suffering. It's more than just physical pain or discomfort. It's the mental and emotional struggle we face when life throws us curveballs. The heartbreak when relationships end, the anxiety of the unknown future, the stress of daily life, the despair from loss. These are all forms of suffering that touch us to our very core. Why do we suffer? It's an age-old question, isn't it? Some might say it's due to our circumstances. Others might argue it's because of our own thoughts and actions. But here's a thought. What if suffering is simply a part of the human experience? Just like joy, love, and happiness, suffering is a part of life's rich tapestry. It's not pleasant, but it's inevitable. But here's the twist. Despite its inevitability, we're not doomed to a life of perpetual suffering. Oh no, far from it. You see, while we can't always control what happens to us, we can control how we respond to it. We can choose not to let our suffering consume us. We can choose to rise above it. This is not about suppressing or ignoring our pain. Rather, it's about acknowledging it, understanding it, and then learning to let it go. It's about finding peace amidst the chaos, finding light in the darkness, finding strength in our struggles. It's about freeing ourselves from the chains of chronic suffering and embracing a life of inner peace and happiness. While suffering is a part of life, it doesn't have to define our existence. And that, dear listeners, is a beautiful thing. So, let's embark on this journey together. A journey of self-discovery, of healing, and of liberation from suffering. Are you ready? Let's begin. To understand how we can free ourselves from suffering, we first need to grasp the concept of identification. Now, identification, in this context, isn't about your driver's license or passport. Instead, it's about how closely you align yourself with your thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Think of it this way. You're experiencing a feeling of sadness. This feeling is like a cloud passing through the sky, which in this case is your mind. Now, do you see yourself as the sky, vast and unchanging? Or do you see yourself as the cloud, temporary and fleeting? When you identify with the cloud, you're essentially saying, "I am sad." But when you see the cloud for what it is, just a passing phenomenon in the sky, you simply observe there is sadness. This subtle shift in perception is where identification comes into play. When we identify with our emotions, thoughts, or experiences, we become them. We entangle ourselves so deeply that we can no longer distinguish where they end and we begin. This is when suffering intensifies. For example, if you identify with a negative thought like, "I'm not good enough," you start to believe it as an unchangeable truth about yourself. This belief then influences your self-esteem, your actions, and eventually, your entire life. It's like wearing tinted glasses. They color everything you see. The same goes for experiences. If you've gone through a traumatic event and you identify with that experience, you carry it with you like a heavy load, letting it define your life. This identification with past trauma can keep you stuck in a cycle of pain and suffering. But here's the good news. Just as you have the power to identify with these thoughts, emotions, and experiences, you also have the power to disidentify from them. You can learn to observe them as separate from your true self, just as the sky observes the passing clouds. Identification can bind us to our suffering, but recognizing this gives us the key to liberation. Now let's delve into how we can break free from the chains of identification. So, how do we go about this? How do we stop identifying with negative thoughts and emotions? Well, it's not as daunting as it might sound. Let's break it down into a few manageable steps. Firstly, we need to become aware of our thoughts and emotions. This sounds simple, but many of us go through our days on autopilot, not truly conscious of the thoughts that are running through our minds. So, start by paying attention. Notice when a negative thought or emotion arises. Don't judge it or try to push it away, just observe it. Next, remind yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. This might seem like a subtle distinction, but it's incredibly powerful. You see, when we identify with a thought, we're essentially saying, "This is me. This is who I am." But when we observe a thought, we're saying, This is something that's happening within me, but it's not me. Imagine you're sitting by a river, watching the water flow by. Your thoughts are like the objects floating on the river, leaves, twigs, maybe even a little rubber duck. You're not the objects on the river, you're the observer sitting on the bank. Once you've got the hang of observing your thoughts, it's time to challenge them. Is that negative thought really true? Is it helpful? Often we'll find that our negative thoughts are based on assumptions or fears, not on reality. By questioning our thoughts, we can start to loosen their grip on us. Then, practice self-compassion. It's okay to have negative thoughts and emotions. It's okay to feel sad or scared or angry. We're human, and these emotions are part of the human experience. So instead of beating yourself up for feeling a certain way, offer yourself some kindness. Tell yourself it's okay, I'm doing the best I can. Lastly, cultivate positive thoughts. This isn't about denying or suppressing your negative thoughts, it's about choosing to focus on the positive. What are you grateful for? What do you love about yourself? What brings you joy? By focusing on these things, you can help to shift your mindset and reduce the power of negative thoughts and emotions. Let's take an example. Imagine you're feeling anxious about a presentation at work. Instead of identifying with the anxiety and thinking, "I'm an anxious person," observe the anxiety. Challenge it. Is it really true that you're an anxious person, or are you just feeling anxious in this moment? Practice self-compassion. It's okay to feel anxious. And then, cultivate positive thoughts. Maybe you're grateful for the opportunity to share your ideas, or maybe you love that you're challenging yourself and growing in your career. By disentangling ourselves from negative identification, we open the door to inner peace. The journey to free yourself from suffering is not a destination, but a continuous path. It's a process of self-discovery and understanding, a voyage that takes you deeper into your own mind and soul. It's about recognizing that suffering, while a part of life, does not define you. It's about learning how to let go of the negative thoughts and emotions that bind you, and discovering the strength that lies within you. The key to this journey lies in the power of your own mind. When you learn to identify and break away from the negative thoughts and emotions that cause you pain, you unlock the door to inner peace. But remember, this isn't a one-time action. It's a practice that requires patience, persistence, and time. Consider it like training a muscle. At first, it may seem difficult, maybe even impossible, but with each day, with each deliberate action to let go of your negative identifications, you grow stronger. You become more adept at handling the waves of life, no matter how high they may rise. Through this process, you learn to distinguish between the inevitable pain that comes with life and the suffering that arises from identification with negative thoughts and emotions. You learn to free yourself from the chains of suffering and step into a world of tranquility and peace. So how do you embark on this journey? Begin by implementing the tips we've shared. Practice mindfulness. Learn to observe your thoughts without judgment and gradually break away from the cycle of negative identification. Remember, it's okay to stumble, to falter. You're human. But it's important not to lose sight of your goal, peace. And each time you rise, each time you choose not to identify with your negative thoughts and emotions, you move one step closer to it. Remember, the power to lessen your suffering lies within you. Embark on this path and discover the tranquility that awaits. As we wrap up, let's revisit the key points we discussed today. We've explored the inevitability of suffering, the concept of identification, and techniques for breaking free from negative thought patterns. Remember, suffering is an inevitable part of life, but it doesn't have to define us. We can choose not to identify with our negative thoughts and emotions, thereby freeing ourselves from their grip. This journey may seem challenging, and indeed it is. But every step you take, every negative thought you let go of, brings you closer to inner peace. It's not an overnight transformation, but a continuous process of growth and understanding. Believe in your capacity to change, to rise above the turmoil and find tranquility within yourself. Embrace the journey with an open heart and a resilient spirit. We hope this understanding brings you closer to a life of lesser suffering and greater peace. Thank you for joining us on this journey.